hotel phone rang, sharp and insistent, cutting through the humid air of Medellín. David, already dressed, answered with a casual disregard that stung, then handed it over, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's your husband," he drawled, his eyes never leaving her naked form. The phone felt cold in her hand, the quiet click of Frank's voice. "You're a lousy animal," a sudden public judgment that left her exposed, cornered, and utterly broken. David just shrugged, pouring another glass of something expensive. The air in the Medellín hotel room was thick, humid, and smelled faintly of expensive cigar smoke and something sweeter, like jasmine. Eleanor Vance lay on the crisp white sheets, the fan whirring above, doing little to stir the heavy atmosphere. She had been here for 6 weeks now, a period that felt both impossibly long and fleeting, tangled in the clandestine comfort of Dr. David Albright's arms. The sun, a brutal disk outside, streamed through a gap in the heavy curtains, highlighting dust motes dancing in the stillness. Her phone vibrated on the bedside table, a jarring intrusion. She reached for it, her fingers clumsy in the aftermath of sleep. Frank Miller, his name glowed on the screen, an unwelcome beacon from a life she had momentarily forgotten. She answered, her voice still thick with sleep and a false cheerfulness. His voice, when it came, was not the measured, even tone she knew. It was strained, brittle, raw. "You're a lousy animal," he said, the words cutting through the humid air like a physical blow. Then a sharp click, and the line went dead. The silence that followed was louder than any shout. David stirred beside her, propping himself up on one elbow. He had been pretending to sleep, she realized, watching her through half-closed eyes. A slow smirk spread across his face, not unkind but devoid of any real concern for her. "Who was that?" he asked, though his eyes already held the answer. He knew. He had always known this call was coming, or one like it. Eleanor stared at the phone in her hand, the screen now dark. She swallowed, the movement catching in her throat. The words came out, barely a whisper, a small, fragile confession. "That was my husband." The admission hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. David's smirk widened, morphing into something more predatory. He leaned in, his voice a low purr against her ear. "Now that the cat's out of the bag, we don't have to be so discreet, do we?" He chuckled, a soft, self-satisfied sound. His arm tightened around her, a possessive gesture. The words were meant to be comforting, a liberation, but they landed with the cold weight of a sentence. A jolt of raw, unwelcome guilt shot through Eleanor. It was a cold dose of reality, piercing through the hazy warmth of their illicit escape. The tropical heat that had seemed so romantic, so exotic, now felt stifling, oppressive. She thought of Frank, his face, his steady hands, the way he always folded his clothes just so. The life she had left behind, now shattered by a few brutal words. She knew then that something profound had shifted, that the affair had taken on a new, darker dimension. The thrill was gone, replaced by a dull ache of consequence. Yet she stayed. For another 6 weeks the affair continued, a runaway train that had derailed but kept moving forward on its own destructive momentum. There was a peculiar comfort in its new openness, a perverse relief in no longer having to hide, but it was a cold comfort. David became more possessive, less charming. He still held her hand across restaurant tables, but his gaze often drifted, impatient. He would make plans and then cancel them without apology, his explanation vague, delivered with a shrug. He was good at making promises that vanished like smoke. A creeping realization settled in, quiet but insistent. David was nothing like the steady, reliable man she had married. Frank had been a man of habits, of quiet routine, but his presence had been a constant, a solid anchor. David was a tempest, exhilarating at first, but ultimately unpredictable, unmoored. He rarely spoke of his own life outside of their shared moments, and when he did, it was always with a dismissive wave of his hand. He was a man without roots, and she was beginning to feel that same unsettling lack of ground beneath her feet. 6 weeks after Frank's call, Eleanor landed back in the crisp, familiar air of home. The change was stark, the green lawns and orderly streets a sharp contrast to Medellín's vibrant chaos. She felt a strange mix of hope and desperation. She had booked a room at the Grand Ambassador Hotel, a neutral ground, a place of quiet luxury where she hoped to meet Frank. She had practiced her speech on the long flight, the words honed and polished, ready to convey her remorse, her longing for reconciliation. She had even bought a vintage pocket watch, a small, intricate piece she knew Frank would appreciate, a tangible peace offering. A bellhop in a crisp uniform took her luggage, his movements efficient. Eleanor walked into the elegant lobby, her eyes scanning the familiar space. She expected to see him, perhaps nursing a coffee or standing by the large windows. But the lobby was busy with other travelers, their conversations a low hum. Frank was nowhere to be seen. The polished marble floor of the Grand Ambassador felt cold beneath my feet as I approached the front desk. A knot of anxiety had begun to tighten in my stomach the moment the bellhop disappeared with my bags, leaving me alone in the expansive lobby. The air was hushed, refined, a stark contrast to the buzzing chaos of Medellín. My hands felt clammy, though the air conditioning was brisk. Leo Rodriguez, the hotel manager, was a man in his late 40s with silvering temples and an impeccably tailored suit. He looked up, his smile immediate and practiced, his eyes a professional blue that held no particular warmth. "Welcome back, Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice smooth and familiar from previous days. I started to correct him. "It's Vance," but the name felt foreign on my tongue. Eleanor Vance. It was the name on my passport, the name I had used in Medellín, but it felt like a ghost, a remnant of a life I hadn't lived in over 2 decades. Miller, Frank Miller's wife. That felt more natural, more worn, like a comfortable old sweater. I just nodded instead. "Checking in today, Mrs. Miller?" he asked, his fingers already dancing across his keyboard. "Yes," I managed, my voice a little hoarse. "And I'll need 2 key cards. My husband will be joining me later." The lie felt heavy, a dull ache behind my ribs. My gaze flickered to the lobby entrance, a foolish habit. Leo hummed noncommittally, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Certainly." He slid a credit card machine across the counter. "Just run your card for the incidentals, please." I pulled out my primary credit card, a gold-embossed Visa, and slid it into the slot. The machine whirred, then beeped once, a flat, final sound. A message flashed across the tiny screen. "Declined." My cheeks flushed. "Oh," I said, a small, embarrassed sound. "That's odd. Try this one." I fumbled for my American Express, a card Frank insisted I keep for emergencies. I slid it in, my heart quickening. The machine whirred again, longer this time, then another flat beep. "Declined." The flush spread, hot and uncomfortable, up my neck and into my ears. My carefully constructed composure was cracking. I don't understand," I stammered, looking at Leo, who remained maddeningly calm. He offered another one of his practiced smiles, though this one seemed to hold a hint of polite concern. "Sometimes the banks flag international transactions, Mrs. Miller, or if there's an unusual spending pattern. Happens all the time." He paused, his gaze briefly flicking to the young couple behind me in line, who were now openly staring. "Perhaps a quick call to your bank, or Mr. Miller if he's available?" "Yes, right," I mumbled, feeling the pressure of their impatient stares. My phone. It was dead from the flight, a useless brick in my purse. I clutched my handbag tighter, murmuring an apology to Leo, and stepped away from the desk, heading toward a cluster of chairs near a potted palm. I pulled out my phone, a dull black rectangle. I pressed the power button, expecting nothing but hoping, foolishly, that perhaps, just perhaps, Frank would have sent a message, an explanation. A simple, "I'm running late." My heart hammered against my ribs as the screen flickered to life, showing the familiar home screen. No notifications, no missed calls, nothing. Frank was meticulously punctual, a man who planned everything down to the minute. This empty screen felt like another rejection. My thumb hovered over his contact. I pressed it, the sound of the dialing tone echoing in my ear, too loud in the quiet lobby. 1 ring, 2, then a calm, automated female voice broke through, devoid of emotion. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." Disconnected, not busy, not voicemail, disconnected. The words settled over me, cold and heavy, like a shroud. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Just then a man walked up to me. He was tall, thin, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, carrying a slim briefcase. His face was unfamiliar. He stopped directly in front of me, his expression unreadable. "Are you Eleanor Vance?" he asked, his voice low without preamble. I nodded, unable to speak, my mouth suddenly dry. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope, sealed with red wax. It looked important, official. He handed it to me. The envelope had a surprising weight to it, like a stack of dense paper. He didn't say another word, just turned on his heel and walked away, disappearing into the crowd near the lobby entrance. I sank into the nearest armchair, the plush fabric doing little to cushion the sudden impact of everything. The envelope sat in my lap, heavy and ominous. A fragile hope, barely a flicker, struggled against the growing chill within me. The crisp rustle of the manila envelope was a harsh sound in the quiet lobby. My fingers, still trembling, tore at the red wax seal, then ripped along the flap. The brief, desperate hope that this might be some explanation, some pathway back to Frank, shattered with each tear of paper. Inside, there was a stack of neatly typed pages, a letter, and a smaller sealed envelope. I pulled out the letter first, my eyes scanning the familiar font, Frank's careful, precise way of putting things. His words hit me like a physical blow, each sentence a deliberate cut. "Eleanor," it began, without any preamble. "I'm no coward, but I couldn't face you. Not now. Your flagrant disregard for our marriage, the one we built over 2 decades, broke my heart in a way I didn't think possible." He went straight to the heart of it, to the accusations I had hurled at him for years, the ones about Sarah Jensen in Iraq. He wrote, "You've often accused me of sleeping with Sarah in Iraq. Let me be clear. I never had penetrative intimacy with her." Not once. The words were stark, leaving no room for doubt. Then he admitted, "After the ambush in Mosul, the one where we almost lost half our platoon, Sarah and I shared a single kiss." A heat of the moment lapse, fueled by fear and the raw relief of still being alive. He paused, or the letter paused, then continued. "It was a mistake, a regrettable one, but it was spontaneous, a momentary break under extreme duress. It was nothing like your carefully planned affair." The contrast stung, his single, impulsive kiss, born of terror, against my protracted, deliberate betrayal. The irony, the sheer hypocrisy of my long-held indignation, was a bitter taste in my mouth. I had used Sarah Jensen as a shield, a weapon, a convenient excuse for my own restlessness, for my own failings. He continued, his words precise, damning. "You're the only woman I'd had intercourse with since we married over 20 years ago. I'm sure you cannot say the same." A wave of sick hypocrisy washed over me, hot and cold at once. I remembered all those arguments, all the tears I had shed, real or manufactured, over his supposed betrayal with Sarah. I had twisted that incident, blown it out of proportion, made it into something it wasn't. And all the while I had known the full, complete truth of my own actions. My betrayal had been thorough, deliberate, a planned deviation from our shared path. Then came the next blow, delivered with the same calm, surgical precision. "In addition to David Albright, I know for a fact that you had an affair while I was away on assignment in Korea." My breath hitched. The Korean assignment. That was 4 years ago. My mind raced, trying to grasp what he meant. He couldn't possibly know, but he did. "You would park your car at the Red Roof Inn almost an hour before your hospital shift started, sometimes for a full 2 hours. Your car, your time, meticulously logged." My blood ran cold. The Red Roof Inn. It came back to me in a sickening rush. The cheap coffee, the anonymous rooms, the stale scent of disinfectant and something else, something illicit. It was with a man from the hospital, a doctor, kind but detached. Someone I had convinced myself was merely a distraction from the loneliness of Frank's absence. "I hired a private investigator for that one, Eleanor," Frank wrote, "just for a few weeks, to confirm what I suspected. The man was never identified. I didn't care about his name. I just needed to know if my suspicions were grounded in reality. They were. He hired a private investigator. 4 years ago. He had known all this time. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. He had lived with this knowledge, carrying it, silent, while I had continued to play the injured wife. I gave you a pass on that affair, he continued, a phrase that chilled me to the bone. I understood your needs, your loneliness, or so I told myself. I told myself it was just a temporary lapse, something born of my absence. He even noted the end of it, with the same chilling accuracy. You stopped parking at the Red Roof Inn early the moment I came home. You stopped. And I hoped, Eleanor, I truly hoped that it meant you were done seeking comfort outside our marriage. The Red Roof Inn. It resurfaced now, not as a vague, distant memory, but as a vivid, humiliating tableau. The shame was a burning inferno, scorching away the last vestiges of my self-deception. Frank's letter continued, laying out the chilling details of a financial obliteration. My breath hitched in my throat as I read on, each sentence a blow. I've closed all joint accounts, he wrote, his words clipped and final, and canceled all credit cards associated with our marriage. My lawyer will be in touch, but for now you're left with the $500 cash I left in your travel bag and your return flight ticket. The $500, I remembered seeing it, neatly folded, tucked into the side pocket of my carry-on. I'd thought it was a thoughtful gesture, a little extra spending money. Now it was all I had. He hadn't stopped there. I've also liquidated our retirement accounts, all of them, including your 401k. You will find that you have no shared assets left to claim. He had taken everything, every penny we had saved, every plan we had made for the future, erased with a few strokes of a pen. Then came the final devastating pronouncements. I've filed for divorce, citing infidelity. My lawyer will seek full custody of Mark. I believe a stable environment, free from the kind of behavior you've exhibited, is paramount for his well-being. Mark, our son, the thought of losing him, of him hearing about all of this, twisted a fresh knife in my gut. My vision blurred. As for the house, the letter concluded, I'm selling it immediately. Your half of the proceeds, Eleanor, will be donated to a local charity of my choosing. I couldn't bear the thought of you profiting from the wreckage of our life together. My hand, gripping the letter, began to shake violently. The carefully typed words blurred, swimming before my eyes. My chest felt tight, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. I was hyperventilating, the elegant lobby of the Grand Ambassador Hotel starting to spin around me, the hushed conversations of other guests sounding distant and distorted. A shadow fell over me. I looked up to see Leo Rodriguez, the hotel manager, standing there, his practiced smile replaced by an expression of genuine concern. Mrs. Miller, are you all right? He asked, his voice softer now, less formal. You look quite distressed. Do you need a glass of water, or perhaps some assistance? His presence, his concern, felt like an invasion. My mind was a whirlwind of panic, despair, and a raw, burning terror. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. My hands shot out, shoving him instinctively, blindly. Leave me alone, I gasped, the words barely intelligible. Leo stumbled back a step, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He hesitated, then retreated, disappearing back behind the front desk, his professional composure probably rattled. Alone again, the full weight of Frank's letter pressing down on me, I fumbled in my purse for my phone. David. David was my last shred of hope. He would understand. He would help. He loved me. He had said so, hadn't he? 100 times in the quiet intimacy of that Medellín hotel room. I dialed his number, my fingers clumsy. The ringing felt interminable, each pulse of sound grating on my raw nerves. Finally, a voice, sharp and annoyed. Eleanor, what do you want? It was David, but his tone was cold, unwelcoming. And there was another sound in the background, a woman's laugh, light and easy. My heart sank, a cold dread washing over me. David, I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. Frank knows everything. He's disconnected everything. I have nothing. I have nowhere to go. There was a pause, a rustle, as if he had moved the phone away from his ear, or perhaps moved away from the woman. Then his voice returned, harder, colder than before. Eleanor, I'm with my wife, Maggie. The words were delivered without a trace of remorse, a simple statement of fact. Our time together was a brief fling, nothing more. You knew the score. A brief fling, nothing more. The casual dismissal, the utter lack of care, was a final crushing blow. But my money, I stammered, desperation clawing at my throat. I have no money, David. My cards are canceled. My accounts are empty. He scoffed, a short dismissive sound. Your financial problems are not my problem, Eleanor. And then, without another word, he hung up. The line went dead, leaving a hollow silence that echoed the emptiness in my gut. I stared at the black screen of my phone, the small rectangle of plastic that had just delivered the news of my complete abandonment. The full, crushing weight of my choices, of my betrayals, crashed down on me. I was utterly alone. With the 500 franc had left, a sum that felt meager and insufficient, I managed to find a cheap room in a motel on the outskirts of town. It was a place with faded carpets, a pervasive smell of stale cigarettes, and a thin mattress that sagged in the middle. The Grand Ambassador's polished marble and hushed luxury now felt like a cruel, mocking memory, a mirage from a life that no longer existed. This was my new reality. My first thought, once I was alone in the dingy room, was Mark. I pulled out my phone, still clutching at the desperate hope that some part of my old life remained intact. I dialed his number, the familiar sequence of digits. It rang once, then a recorded message. The number you have dialed is not accepting calls from this number. Frank had blocked me. My son, my only child, was now beyond my reach, a casualty of my own making. A flashback came unbidden, sharp and unwelcome, cutting through the stale air of the motel room. David Albright, his face flushed with the tropical heat, leaning in close in a dimly lit Medellín bar. His voice, a low rumble, telling me how special I was, how different from other women. He'd made me feel uniquely seen, desirable, alive in a way Frank hadn't in years. He'd praised my intelligence, my adventurous spirit, the way I laughed. Every word had been a carefully placed brick, building a wall around me, separating me from my life back home. He had paid for everything, of course. Always, from the lavish dinners to the excursions, the expensive hotel suites. He'd never let me reach for my purse, always brushing my hand away with a charming smile, saying, "My treat, my dear. Consider it my pleasure." It had felt generous, romantic then. Now I saw it for what it was, a subtle, insidious dependency he had created, a trap he had laid with silken threads. I had been too blind, too eager to notice. His casual dismissal, the utter lack of care in his voice, now made the pattern clear. The emotional manipulation, the careful isolation, the constant flattery, all designed to serve his own fleeting desires. His empty charm, which had once felt so intoxicating, now revealed itself as a hollow shell, a means to an end. I was just another conquest, a brief diversion from his respectable life with Maggie. The full scope of my ruin settled in, cold and heavy, financially broke, no access to any funds, cast aside by a lover who was never truly mine, cut off from my family, from my husband, and most painfully, from my son. Every choice I had made, every lie I had told, every moment of selfish indulgence had led me here. This dingy room, this crushing solitude, a profound, aching loneliness washed over me, a taste of the bitter, cold consequences I had so recklessly invited. It was a loneliness I had never truly known, even when Frank had been distant or when I had sought solace in other arms. This was a bottomless pit, a complete absence of connection. I had to start from scratch, with no home, no money, no one to turn to. The words echoed in the silence of the room, stark and undeniable. This was it. I walked to the small, grimy mirror above the sink. The woman staring back at me was haunted, her eyes wide and red-rimmed, her face pale and drawn. I barely recognized her. The confident, adventurous woman who had boarded that plane to Medellín felt like a ghost, a long-lost memory. But as I stared, something shifted. A tiny spark deep within the wreckage, a fierce, primal need to survive, a flicker of something that had been buried under layers of self-pity and despair. I didn't know how. I didn't know where, but I had to. This raw, desperate impulse to keep breathing, to find a way out was all I had left. Life's costly choices unfold in unexpected ways. Stick around to the end to see how Eleanor navigates this desolate path. Months crawled by, a slow, grinding progression of days that blurred into weeks. My life had contracted to a grim routine. I was cleaning houses, my hands raw from harsh detergents and scrubbing. The ache in my joints was a constant companion, a physical manifestation of my new reality, a brutal counterpoint to the soft hands that once managed a hospital floor. Every attempt to reach Mark was met with the same impenetrable wall. My calls to his phone went unanswered, inevitably followed by a curt, formal letter from Frank's lawyer. Mr. Miller requests you cease direct contact. All communication regarding Mark must go through legal channels. I left voicemails, desperate pleas, texts filled with apologies and promises, but they vanished into a void, never acknowledged, never returned. Frank was relentlessly pursuing in sole custody, making it clear, through his lawyer's cold words, that I would have minimal access, if any. One warm afternoon, I was finishing up a house near Elm Street, buffing a kitchen counter to a shine when I saw them. The house overlooked the neighborhood park, a familiar patch of green where I had pushed Mark on swings countless times. I glanced out the window, just a habitual gesture, and my heart seized. There was Mark. He was older now, taller, his laugh echoing across the expanse of grass as he threw a baseball. Frank was with him, catching the ball with an easy grace, his face alight with a genuine happiness I hadn't seen in years. He looked relaxed. At peace, they were playing, just the two of them, a familiar scene, but one I was now an outsider to. And then I know her. Brenda Stone. She sat on a bench under the shade of an oak tree, a paperback in her hand, but her eyes were on Mark and Frank. She was smiling, a soft, warm smile, and when Frank looked over at her, there was an easy familiarity between them, a comfort that spoke of shared lives. The sight of my son, so happy, so utterly absorbed in this new family unit, sent a searing pain through me. It wasn't the kind of pain that made you cry out. It was deeper, more fundamental, like a tear in the fabric of my own being. I instinctively pulled back from the window, pressing myself against the wall, hiding behind the heavy drapes, a heartbroken ghost observing my own lost life. They looked so complete. Frank and Brenda, a serene new life built on the ruins of my old one with Mark at its heart. Brenda even gestured for Mark to take a drink from a thermos, a simple maternal gesture that twisted the knife deeper. She was doing the things I should have been doing, the small, daily acts of care that knit a family together. My longing to hold Mark, to feel his small hand in mine, was a physical ache, a profound emptiness in my arms. But I knew I couldn't risk approaching. The lawyer's letters, Frank's determination, the fragile thread of my desperation, it all screamed caution. Any attempt to insert myself into their new world would only confirm Frank's narrative of my instability, further alienate Mark, and certainly jeopardize any slim chance I had of seeing him again. I was the disruptor, the outsider. The crushing realization settled in. I had been replaced. Not just as a wife, but as an active daily mother in Mark's life. He looked so happy. He didn't look like he missed me. That thought, though irrational, was unbearable. It felt like a verdict handed down with a casual indifference. I turned away from the park. The image of their serene tableau burned into my mind. The green grass, Mark's laughter, Brenda's gentle smile. It fueled a desperate, gnawing need for answers. How could Frank have moved on so completely? How could he have built this new life so quickly? I needed to understand. The image of Mark and Frank and Brenda in the park, a perfect, serene picture of a life I no longer belonged to, gnawed at me. It festered, fueling a raw desperation that finally pushed me to Frank's office. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up, my resolve hardening with every step. The receptionist, a young woman who knew me from occasional visits over the years, looked uncomfortable, but my insistence was unyielding. Frank was busy, she said. I told her I'd wait. Eventually, after an hour of cold silence in the waiting room, she came back. Mr. Miller will see you now. His office was unchanged, still neat, still orderly. He sat behind his large mahogany desk, his posture erect. He looked at me, but his eyes were flat, distant, completely devoid of the man I had known for 20 years. There was no anger, no sadness, just a chilling calm. I sat in the chair opposite him, the same chair I used to slump into, tired after we'd gone grocery shopping, waiting for him to finish up. Now it felt like a defendant's seat. "Frank," I started, my voice trembling. "Please, I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but please just give me a chance. For Mark. For us." My plea felt hollow even to my own ears. He listened, unmoving, his expression an unyielding mask. When I finished, the silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then he spoke, his voice flat, emotionless, as if reading from a legal document. "There will be no alimony, Eleanor." I flinched, but he continued, his gaze unwavering. "The house is being sold. Your share goes to charity, as stated in my letter. I've already set it up." "And Mark?" I whispered, my throat tight. "Please, Frank, I need to see him." "You'll have supervised visitation with Mark," he said, his voice clipped. "At my discretion, through our lawyers. It will be minimal. And only if Mark agrees." Minimal, if Mark agrees. The words were a fresh wound. "But Frank," I began, my voice rising in desperation. "It was a moment of weakness. I was lonely. You were away so much. I didn't mean to." He cut me off, a sharp, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Weakness? You think a carefully planned affair in Medellín, weeks long, is a moment of weakness? Or the Red Roof Inn? That was a moment of weakness too, I suppose." His tone wasn't angry, but utterly, devastatingly dismissive. "I've been planning this for a long time, Eleanor. Since Korea, actually. I just needed to gather the evidence, to make sure there were no ambiguities." My mind raced back to his letter, the private investigator. He had been planning this for years. While I was living my life, making my choices, he was meticulously building his case. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the polished wood of the desk. "Remember that email you sent me years ago when you joked about hall passes, if Brenda Stone ever came to visit when I was away? That was useful in court, to demonstrate your mindset, your cavalier attitude towards our marriage vows." The email, a flippant, careless joke I had sent in an unguarded moment, thinking it harmless, thinking he wouldn't read too much into it. But he had kept it. Every casual word, every perceived slight had been logged, stored away. "You chipped away at me, Eleanor," he said, his voice still low, controlled, but now with a faint, chilling tremor beneath it. "Every time you lied, every time you looked at me and thought I was a fool, every time you sought validation outside of our home. It wasn't one big explosion. It was a slow, steady erosion. It left me hollowed out, empty." I stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time in years. The man sitting across from me was a stranger, utterly unrecognizable. The kind, patient Frank I had married, the man I had taken for granted, was gone. In his place was a man of cold, calculated ruthlessness, whose eyes held a depth of pain I had never imagined, a pain so profound it had manifested as this absolute, unyielding vengeance. It was a terrifying, overwhelming realization. Frank leaned forward, his voice dropping, almost conspiratorial. The professional veneer began to crack, revealing something far more chilling underneath. This wasn't just about anger, it was about a deep, intricate plan, years in the making. "You asked how I knew about the Red Roof Inn," he began, his eyes locking onto mine, holding me captive. "It wasn't just the private investigator, Eleanor. That confirmed my suspicions, yes, but it wasn't how I first learned." A cold dread began to seep into my bones. He paused, a small, grim smile touching his lips. "Do you remember Kira's husband, Tom Jensen?" My blood turned to ice. Kira. My coworker at the hospital, the bubbly, vivacious nurse whose husband was an engineer. Tom Jensen. The name hit me with the force of a physical blow, resurrecting the face I had tried so hard to forget. My lover at the Red Roof Inn. "Yes," I managed to choke out, my voice barely audible. Frank's smile widened, a cruel, satisfied curve of his lips. "Good, because I was the one who anonymously tipped off Tom about his wife's affair with David Albright." The words hung in the air, A shocking revelation that stunned me into silence. David and Kira. The realization that they too had been involved, that I had been unknowingly enmeshed in a larger web of betrayal, was almost too much to process. Tom, as you might imagine, was enraged. Frank continued, his voice devoid of sympathy. He confronted Kira, and in the ensuing chaos, looking for his own revenge, he told her about your little rendezvous at the Red Roof Inn, and then he told me. Well, Frank leaned back, a look of grim triumph on his face. So you see, Eleanor, the Red Roof Inn wasn't just a pass. It was my first piece of leverage, my first confirmation of your true nature. Leverage. My stomach churned. He had played a long game, a meticulously calculated chess match while I had been blindly stumbling from one betrayal to the next. I waited, Frank went on, his gaze never leaving mine. I watched. I collected. You were so predictable, so careless. I knew you would do it again. And when you went to Colombia with David, when you stopped calling, when you sent that email, his voice hardened, a flicker of true pain flashing in his eyes before it was quickly suppressed. That was the final nail in your coffin, Eleanor. The hall pass email, the one where I had flippantly joked about him needing a hall pass with Brenda Stone, as if our marriage was a playground game. That email, Frank reiterated, sealed your fate. It wasn't just proof of your infidelity. It proved you were not just thoughtless, but delusional. To mock the sacredness of our vows, to joke about what you clearly believed was a double standard. It showed a complete lack of understanding of what marriage meant, what I meant. He recounted his own suffering, the years of feeling diminished, ridiculed, and profoundly betrayed by my actions. The casual disregard, the hidden rendezvous, the way I had weaponized his supposed infidelity with Sarah while carrying on my own secret life. He spoke of the sleepless nights, the quiet despair, the erosion of his self-respect. And then, the most chilling admission of all. And yes, he said, his voice now almost a whisper, but clear and precise. There is a grim satisfaction in this, Eleanor, a certain joy, an eye for an eye. You broke me piece by piece. Now I'm just returning the favor. It's what you deserve. I sat in stunned, horrified silence, the intricate, long-woven web of deceit and revenge finally unfurling before me. This wasn't just a reaction. It was a methodical dismantling, a slow, deliberate act of retribution that stretched back years. The full scope of his methodical vengeance, his carefully planned destruction of my life, was horrifyingly, brutally clear. I left Frank's office, the weight of his revelations pressing down on me, crushing my spirit until I felt like dust. The streets of my old town, once so familiar, now stretched out before me, alien and unwelcoming. Every corner, every storefront, every crack in the sidewalk held a memory, now forever tainted by betrayal and profound loss. I walked, not knowing where I was going, my mind replaying Frank's chilling words, my rationalizations, my convenient denials, my desperate pursuit of fleeting passion. They all unraveled. The tropical fantasy I had indulged in Medellín had been ripped away, replaced by a stark, unforgiving reality. There was no one left to blame, not David Albright for his hollow promises, not Frank Miller for his calculated vengeance, only profound, aching regret for myself, for the woman I had been, for the choices I had made. I had lost not just a husband and a home, but my entire identity, my very future. The silence of my new, isolated existence was deafening, a constant reminder of everything I had sacrificed. I had to rebuild from nothing, facing a life stripped bare of comfort, love, and forgiveness. The familiar Midwestern landscape, once a symbol of stability, now mirrored the emptiness within me. Eleanor Vance understood the full, crushing price of betrayal she had truly paid. Her story, she knew, would be a cautionary tale. She would carry the weight of her choices, a permanent scar, in a quiet existence shaped by profound loss. I left Frank's office, the weight of his revelations pressing down on me, crushing my spirit until I felt like dust. The streets of my old town, once so familiar, now stretched out before me, alien and unwelcoming. Every corner, every storefront, every crack in the sidewalk held a memory, now forever tainted by betrayal and profound loss. I walked, not knowing where I was going, my mind replaying Frank's chilling words. My rationalizations, my convenient denials, my desperate pursuit of fleeting passion, they all unraveled. The tropical fantasy I had indulged in Medellín had been ripped away, replaced by a stark, unforgiving reality. There was no one left to blame. Not David Albright for his hollow promises, not Frank Miller for his calculated vengeance. Only profound, aching regret for myself, for the woman I had been, for the choices I had made. I had lost not just a husband and a home, but my entire identity, my very future. The silence of my new, isolated existence was deafening, a constant reminder of everything I had sacrificed. I had to rebuild from nothing, facing a life stripped bare of comfort, love, and forgiveness. The familiar Midwestern landscape, once a symbol of stability, now mirrored the emptiness within me. Eleanor Vance understood the full, crushing price of betrayal she had truly paid. Her story, she knew, would be a cautionary tale. She would carry the weight of her choices, a permanent scar, in a quiet existence shaped by profound loss.